This is the story of one of Australia's most iconic airlines, Virgin Australia. From its beginnings as a small startup that took on the giants of the Australian aviation industry, all the way to its collapse during the global pandemic and eventual rebirth as an airline focused on the Australian domestic market. This is the story of Virgin Australia. Part 1. The Birth and Rise of a Rebel. The year is 1999, and Australia's aviation industry is dominated by two major players, Qantas and its regional subsidiary, Impulse, along with Ansett Australia. But this is about to change. In November of 1999, Virgin Blue, a low-cost carrier, will be launched by British entrepreneur Sir Richard Branson. Branson had long been interested in the Australian market and saw an opportunity to disrupt it with a new airline that offered low fares and a no-frills flying experience. Branson's previous experience with Virgin Atlantic and his other Virgin businesses gave him the knowledge and resources to launch Virgin Blue successfully. The first Virgin Blue flight takes off on March 31, 2000, and the airline quickly becomes a major competitor to Qantas and Ansett Australia. Branson's bet on the Australian market was a risky one, but it paid off big time. Within just a few years, Virgin Blue had become one of the most popular airlines in Australia. But the airline's success was not without its challenges. In 2001, Ansett Australia, one of Virgin Blue's main competitors, collapsed due to the aftermath of the September attacks. This created a huge opportunity for Virgin Blue to expand its operations and customer base. However, this also put pressure on the airline to maintain its low fares and high frequency of flights. Despite these challenges, Virgin Blue continued to grow. By 2004, the airline had a fleet of 16 Airbus A320 family aircraft and was carrying over 8 million passengers per year. Part 2. Rebranding and Growth. By the mid-2000s, Virgin Blue was well established in the Australian market and was looking to expand its operations. On March 27, 2011, Virgin Blue announced that it would rebrand itself as Virgin Australia and would introduce a new business class cabin. This was part of the airline's strategy to move away from being seen as a budget airline and to become a full-service carrier. The rebranding was completed in June of 2011, and the new Virgin Australia took to the skies with a modern fleet of Airbus A330s and Boeing 777s. But Virgin Australia's ambitions didn't stop there. In 2012, the airline formed a strategic partnership with Etihad Airways, which gave them access to new markets and a broader global network. The airline also formed a quota-sharing agreement with Delta Airlines in 2015, which allowed them to offer more flight options to North America. Throughout the 2010s, Virgin Australia continued to grow. It added new routes, expanded its fleet, and increased its frequency of flights. But this expansion came at a cost. The airline faced stiff competition from low-cost carriers such as Tiger Airways and Jetstar, as well as from full-service carriers such as Qantas and Air New Zealand. In addition, operating costs were high and fuel prices were volatile. Despite these challenges, Virgin Australia continued to grow. Part 3. The Struggle. Despite its popularity among Australian travelers, Virgin Australia was facing a financial crisis. In fact, it had been struggling for several years before the pandemic hit. According to reports, the airline had accumulated more than $800 million in debt by 2019. Even though the airline was carrying a record number of passengers, an average of 11 million per year, it was still losing money. The reason for this was the intense competition in the Australian aviation market. Not only did it have to compete with the likes of Qantas, but also with low-cost carriers like Jetstar and Tiger Airways. This meant that Virgin Australia had to keep its prices low, which made it difficult to turn a profit. Additionally, the high cost of operations in Australia, including expensive airport fees and labor costs, also contributed to the airline's financial woes. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, which dealt a fatal blow to Virgin Australia. With the sudden drop in demand for air travel, the airline's financial situation became unsustainable, and it was forced to seek protection from its creditors under voluntary administration. On April 2020, Virgin Australia made the announcement that it had stopped flying and would enter voluntary administration. This was a shock to many, as it was one of the largest airline collapses in Australian history. The airline's administrators, Deloitte, stated that they had been unable to find a viable option to keep the airline operating. They did, however, receive a number of offers for parts of the business, and the sale process began immediately. Part 4. Acquisition and Restructuring. After several weeks of negotiations, Bain Capital, a private equity firm, emerged as the successful purchaser of Virgin Australia. Bain Capital was a consortium that included a number of other investors, such as the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board and US-based hedge funds. The purchase price was $3.5 billion, which included the assumption of certain liabilities. Once Bain Capital took over Virgin Australia, it began restructuring the company. This included cutting costs, reducing the size of the fleet, and simplifying the network. The new owners also brought in a new management team led by CEO Jane Hrdlicka, who had previously worked at JET. Despite the changes, the airline's new owners were committed to keeping the Virgin Australia brand. They believed that the brand had strong customer loyalty and was an important part of the airline's identity. As part of the restructuring process, Virgin Australia emerged from voluntary administration on September 2020. At this point, the airline was much smaller than it had been prior to the pandemic. It had a fleet of just 17 aircraft and a network that focused primarily on the Australian domestic market. Part 5. A New Beginning. Since its acquisition by Bain Capital, Virgin Australia has been working hard to build itself back up. It has steadily expanded its network and is now offering flights to a variety of domestic destinations. In addition, the airline has been focusing on improving its customer experience. This includes investing in new technology, such as self-service check-in kiosks and mobile boarding passes. The airline has also been investing in its staff, providing them with additional training to ensure that customers have the best possible experience. In recent years, Virgin Australia has also begun to expand its international network. It started by offering flights to New Zealand and then expanded to Asia. The airline plans to continue growing its international network in the coming years. Despite the challenges it has faced in recent years, Virgin Australia remains an important part of the Australian aviation industry. Its acquisition by Bain Capital was a significant development and has allowed the airline to focus on its core business. As the airline continues to grow, it will be interesting to see what new destinations it will add and how it will continue to improve its customer experience. What do you think of Virgin Australia? Have you flown with them before? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Special thanks to my supporters for their support. Please let me know what topics you would like to see covered in future videos. Catch you later.